Hello and welcome everyone. We're at Florida Closing and Escrow, the only title company in this location, and we've been rated 5-star by the Better Business Bureau. We're mobile, multilingual, and more. And today's topic is the updates to the as-is and contract rider. And if you'd like to get more information or assist with marketing yourself, we're here for your success. I could be reached at 786-457-6832. And this is our first webinar of the new year, so happy and healthy and to much success ahead. Now I'd like to introduce John Ioannou, the owner of Florida Closing and Escrow. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Cindy. Hi, everyone here attending, and hi, everyone on the internet. So, Happy New Year, as Cindy said. With the new year, brought a new contract to residential forms, and we're going to go over those today. We're going to be going over these forms. Cindy can email them to you. You can contact her if you want a copy. Everyone here has one, so let's go into it. And if you have questions later, you can contact me directly, ji@floridaclosing.com, or you can contact the office 786-787-0425. Okay, so hi everyone, welcome here. So new as-is contract, as I just said, and we're going to know it's the new as-is contract because on the bottom of the page, bottom left, it says as-is-7 revised December 2024. So that's how you know you're using the most up-to-date form. The one previous to this was 6XX. So that's no longer the one to use. Everything's on Form Simplicity. So if you're using one of those platforms, they'll have the most up-to-date. I do know some people like to use a previous contract that they've used and they just change the information. Avoid doing that now because we have to use this new contract. Okay. So there are 3 changes to this new contract. So there's not a lot, which is good. There was a big change to the condo rider, which we're also going to go over. And there's a lot of information on that condo rider. That it's good information, but we need to know about it. So that's why you're all here today. So before we go into the changes, since we're here, I just want to remind everyone of some just tips on how to make the as-is contract better with a strong foundation. And these are certain questions that I get throughout the year that I like to go over just so everyone knows how to properly fill this out. And it starts with line 8 of the as-is contract. That's county, that's not country. So make sure we just put Broward or Miami-Dade. I saw one today that said Broward County. You don't have to put Broward County because it says county there. So all you have to really put is Broward, Miami-Dade. Okay. Line 21. This is included here. I have it in your handouts, washer and dryer, if it's included in the condo or house. The reason we have to put it here on line 21 is because it's not included on lines 17, 18, and 19. So line 17, you also recognize that it says range, refrigerator, dishwasher, disposal. You do not need to put those items on line 21. I saw a contract this morning that actually had in there refrigerator, dishwasher, and range. And I pointed out that all of those are actually already included on line 17. So you don't have to be redundant with that. Okay. Obviously, anything excluded, which means not included, goes on line 24. So make sure we know the difference between 21 and 24. I've seen on line 24, someone put fully furnished. So obviously that goes on line 21. And if we're going to put fully furnished, what you think is fully furnished cannot be or can be different than what I think is fully furnished. Does fully furnished include pillows? Does it include sheets? Does it include lamps? pictures. You might think so, I might think not. So the best thing to do on line 21, if we're going to do something fully furnished, is to put inventory lists to be provided by seller within 3 days after effective date, or something like that. It's best to have an inventory list when something is fully furnished, because come walkthrough time, we can just go through the list and check off the things that are included. Anything missing needs to be replaced or given as a credit to the buyer. So that's why walkthroughs are very important, especially when the sale includes furniture. Okay. Our information here is on line 33. Time for acceptance, line 45. This is the time you want the buyer or the seller to apply to your offer. It's best not to leave it blank, line 45, because then your offer just continues to be out there until you withdraw it in writing. So you want to give the seller a time frame in which to respond. You just don't want them to hold it and say, okay, let's hold this one. We don't have to reply anytime soon. Let's see if we get any other offers, and then we'll come back to this one. So you don't want that to happen. So just make sure you include a date on line 45. It could be 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, I'd say, is the max, if you don't want to go too much. Okay. Next page. What do you have in your handouts? What page number? On the bottom.
Wow.
3. Okay. So let's go to page 3. Okay. So now we're getting to the actual first change that was made to this contract. What I was talking about before, those are just tips, right? So now we get into the first change. The first change is under paragraph 9. Closing costs. And what happened was, I don't know if you can kind of see the shaded marks on your things. They added seller's closing services under paragraph 9A. And under 9B, they added buyer's closing services. It's on the right-hand column. Before that was blank. So they added those 2 additional sections: seller's closing services and buyer's closing services. Now, your question is, well, what's a closing service? Go to the next page. They added this right above where it says check 1, right at the top there. 4th line down. Closing services shall be the meaning ascribed in terms section 627. So they don't really define it here. They tell you to go to the Florida statute where it's defined. The good news is I went to the Florida statute, and basically what it says here is closing services include but not limited to preparing documents necessary to close, conducting the closing, handling the dispersing of funds, basically what a title company does. So I suppose they just wanted to be more clear on what we're supposed to do as a title company and who's responsible for them. So they've laid that out here on 9. So for you as a realtor, not that important, doesn't really apply. It's just something that we have to do. So that was the first change. Now, the second change does affect you actually quite severely as a realtor, and that's on the next page. And you have what, page?
7.
Page 7. Okay, so under paragraph 15, when there's a default, the previous contract at the end of paragraph 15A, there was a sentence that said, and in this case it's been deleted, the sentence said, the portion of the deposit, if any, paid to listing broker upon default by buyer shall be split equally between listing broker and cooperating broker. So that has been deleted. So good news if you're a listing agent, bad news if you're a buyer's agent. If there is a default, you as a buyer's agent are not entitled to any portion of the deposit if it's being forfeited. If you're a listing agent, you might be entitled to a portion of the deposit if, according to the listing agreement, you filled out section 8E. And I have attached that in your handout. So go to the next page. And this is a portion of the listing agreement. This is page 3 of the standard listing agreement that you have with your agent. This is just the next page in the handout. Just switch to the next page. And this is a portion of the listing agreement. Again, look at the shaded section.
Also consideration.
So in order for you to get a portion of the forfeited deposit, you need to enter in an amount here under section 8E. Most likely you do it already. Obviously, the standard would be 50%. So if you do have 50% here, if the buyer defaults and forfeits their deposit, you are entitled to 50% of the deposit. You do not have to share it with the buyer's agent if you're a listing agent and you put 50% here. If it's blank, it means it's 0, and then you're not entitled to any of the security deposit or deposit if all of it goes into the seller.
To the seller, okay.
Right. Okay, does that kind of make sense? I threw a lot at you right there. So basically, the change to the contract, this is change number 2, they removed in paragraph 15 the buyer's agent's ability to receive 50% of the forfeited the deposit.
That's right.
In paragraph 15A. So the buyer's agent is no longer entitled. So that was what the change was. Make sense? Okay, so why they did that, who knows? We don't ask why here, we just follow the rules, so. That was the change, 15A, buyer's agent no longer entitled to half of the deposit. If you're a listing agent, make sure that we put in 8E on the listing agreement, 50%, so you get 50% of the deposit. It does happen, not a lot, but it does happen. And sometimes there are buyers that just say, well, forget it, I'm just walking away. And there's a $20,000 deposit or $50,000 deposit. So in 8E of the listing agreement, make sure to put 50% there, okay?
But that goes to the buyer's agent,
No,
half of the 50%.
no.
No?
That's what I just said.
Just say no.
But it's a good, so it was, that's what it was, right, Frank? So go to 15A, go back a page. There was language in the contract that said buyer was entitled to 50%. They have now, as of January 1st, deleted that wording. So now buyer's agents are no longer entitled to any part of a forfeited deposit.
Just the listing agent.
Only the listing agent.
If you put 50% in the listing agreement.
If you leave it in blank, it's 0.
If you leave it blank, the listing agent will get 0.
Correct. Okay. All right, good question. So 15A is the change. No longer buyer's agent entitled to a deposit. Okay? Next change, we're going to, actually, if you want to stay on the listing agreement, just to refresh everyone's memory. So 8A, if we're on the listing agreement, we put 8A, we put normally 6%, right? So this is the listing agreement. We put 8A, 6%, and paragraph 10, we put what you want to share with the cooperating broker. That's normally 3%, right? So that's what you guys are doing now. If I've been asked a question, can I give 2.5 or 2% to the cooperating broker? You can if it's in here, we're under paragraph 10. So a realtor asked me, can I put 6% under 8A and can I put 2% under 10A? The answer is yes. The question then was also, can I put 6% under 8A and 3% under 10A, but then when the realtor asks me what the offer is, I can say 2%? The answer is no. You have to say whatever you have here in agreement with the seller.
In the listing agreement.
Yes. So you can put 2, you can offer 2 to a buyer's agent, but it just has to be under paragraph 10A. Does that make sense? Okay. So 8A, you can put 6% or 5% just when you're offering compensation to the cooperating broker. make sure you put the right amount under 10A, because if you have 3% here, but then you're only offering 2% to the agent when they call, you're not acting in the best interest of the seller. You're acting now in the best interest of yourself, which is unethical.
What about if you are the listing and the buyer at the same time?
So, right, so then sometimes you'll have an agreement with the seller to bring the cooperating broker, you can reduce the amount. But if you have 6 and 3, yes, you're entitled to the full 6%.
Okay.
Okay, that's just a reflection back on that. So continuing back to the contracts, just a tip regarding time. It's not in your handout, but regarding time, remember we're using calendar days. And calendar days includes Saturdays and Sundays and legal holidays, unless the time frame ends on a Saturday or Sunday, then it goes to the next business day. So if it's 5 days and the Saturday and Sunday is in between the 5 days, you count those. If it ends on a Saturday or Sunday, it goes to the next business day, which would be Monday. Unless Monday was a holiday, then it would go to Tuesday. Okay?
Right.
Just a reminder. And we start counting, let's say we sign the contract today. Today is the effective day. What day is day number 1?
Tomorrow.
Correct. So today, the effective date is, you don't start counting today. Today is not 1. You start counting tomorrow as day 1. Okay? And the effective date is when the last party signs and or initials any change to a contract. So if I have an offer, I send it to you signed by me. You send it back to me signed by the seller tomorrow. Effective date is tomorrow. If I send you an offer, you make a change, you send it back to me. If I haven't made an initial to that change, we don't have an effective date yet. It's only when the last person initials or signs, okay? And also, if there are addenda attached to the contract, but they have not been returned, we don't have an effective date until all the addenda are signed as well. Yes?
Yeah, but the initial will be as a signature for the effective date,
No, the initial can be an initial.
but it has to be signed and initial?
Yes. So let's say I send it to you for $1 million. You cross out $1 million and you put 1.1.
You initial
You
that.
initial there and you sign everything else. Now you have to wait for me to initial that change. As soon as I initial it, then it becomes effective. However, also remember, let's say you send it back to me. I initial it today, but I don't send it to you until tomorrow. When is the effective date?
Today you sign. No, the day you initial.
Upon delivery. So it's initial and delivery. So I can sign it today, I can put the date, but if I don't give it to you for 3 days, it's not fair that
Doesn't
we
count.
start 3 days. So it's upon signing and delivery. So when you receive it, that's when the effective date is. Now, you might want to just be clear in case you have a realtor that's a little bit unclear. You can write back, thanks for sending us back the fully executed contract. The effective date is today. Just kind of put that in the email so everyone's on the same page. Okay, moving on. Take a little breath here so you guys can digest some of what I told you there. And also I can take a drink of water. What's the next page in our handout?
11. 11.
11? Okay. Okay, page 11. So this is the third change to the contract. So remember, there was only 3, so there wasn't a lot. There was the first illegal closing costs definition. We just went over the default part, and now the third change is they've added these 2 addenda to paragraph 19. Addendum FF and addendum GG, all the way to the right of the columns, they've added these 2. So, what the heck are these addendums? I have attached them to the handouts. So let's go over those, but let's go quickly to the next page. And always remember for all as-is contracts to add line 591 or something similar. It doesn't have to be this exact language, but with regards to permits and violations, make sure to add this if you're a buyer's agent to all your contracts, because the reason we have to add this is the regular as-is contract says that the buyer is responsible to close out any open permits because it's an as-is contract. So basically what the seller is saying is, hey, you're taking place as is, I don't want to deal with it. So we add this language because it's a little bit unfair to have the buyer close out permits because they don't know anything about it. They don't know the contractors or anything like that. So we add this language in here, and usually sellers are okay with doing that. Sometimes it's just the contractor has to come back out and close it. And actually, sometimes it can be quite expensive, $10,000 or $20,000. So make sure to put this in here, and also make sure to include the word needed. You'll see a lot, and I see a lot of just open permits or expired permits. But an open permit does not mean needed. So let's say someone did work without pulling permits. This has come up actually quite often. If you do work without permits, there's no open permit to deal with, and there's no expired permit. So it's a needed permit. So make sure we include the word needed for anyone who does work without pulling permits, because if someone did work without pulling permits and then an inspector comes in and says, no, the floor was done all wrong, you have to take it out and redo it. That's 20 or 30,000. If the word need is not in here, guess who's paying for it? The buyer. So be very careful, make sure to add the word needed. It has come up several times, and we've gone to, luckily, the realtor who has worked with us before included this language, and we went right to this paragraph and said, hey, look, it says needed here, you need to fix it. So it does happen, so make sure to protect yourself and your customer. Okay, so then we get to this first addendum, FF, is in the next page of your handout. Credit related to buyer's broker compensation. So this is a new addendum with regarding all the rules. It's not really a good addendum because this applies only if the seller is not offering compensation. Then the buyer comes short and their lender says, hey, you need some credits or you need a credit from the seller. And then the buyer goes to the seller and says, hey, I need some credits. And then the seller says, okay, we'll give you a credit. And so this is a very rare addendum to use, like one of those addendums that are not going to be used much. So
Mandatory to use it?
no. So what is mandatory, as we all know, is to make sure you get the compensation agreement signed, right? Compensation agreement, seller's broker to buyer's broker. That's basically the standard form everyone's using. All listing agents are aware of this now, right? So when you make an offer, or before you make an offer, let me clarify that. Before you make an offer, make sure you get the compensation agreement signed by the listing agent, right? Do not say, well, here's our offer and also here's the compensation agreement. Please sign them both and send them back, because what can happen is the seller will sign the offer and the contract and will say, well, actually, because the price is so low, we're no longer offering compensation. We're not signing the compensation agreement. So now you have a fully executed contract. Your buyer's excited, but now you're not getting paid. So make sure that you tell the listing agent, I have an offer I'm about to send you. I'm going to send you over the compensation agreement first, sign it, send it back, and then we'll send the offer. Okay? Or whenever you get the compensation agreement, make sure you just get it before you send the offer. That's the most important part. Okay? Now we go to GG. If you have a seller's agent, it's one of those agents that says, well, we're not sending the compensation agreement until you send the offer. And if you don't want to send the offer, then forget it. All right, so you have to add this addendum. seller's agreement with respect to a buyer broker compensation. So this addendum GG says that the contract is contingent upon a compensation agreement being entered into. So this form is only used if you run into a realtor that says, we're not giving you the compensation agreement until you submit an offer. Okay, so this protects you and makes the contract contingent on the compensation agreement. So this is addendum GG. Use only if you do not have the compensation agreement signed before submitting an offer. Okay. Next, okay, so that's the contract. Those are the three changes to the as-is contract. We're going to jump into the condominium rider changes, but that's it for the as-is contract. Three changes, nothing serious. It's just good for you all to know what the changes were, in case someone asked. And it's also good to know that there is a new contract because just recently I saw a 6XX contract and I had to tell the realtor, you have to use a new contract that's out. Okay. So what's going on with the condo rider? A lot. The first page is the same. Just a tip on the first page. Obviously, if a condo approval is required under paragraph 1, you're going to check is or is not. Right of first refusals, that's if the association or the developer has the right to purchase the unit. Paragraph 3, this is important. This has come up, especially now, the beginning of the year, assessments have gone up. So make sure you put the correct monthly assessment here. We just had a file that was signed in November or December, and they were using the old numbers. And then come January, the assessment went up 20%. So it's another $400. And now the buyer is saying, well, I didn't budget for that, and they didn't put that on here. So the realtors went back and forth, and the seller agreed to give a credit to the buyer of a certain amount for not putting the correct number here. So make sure this number is correct. And if it does change, well, usually it changes at the beginning of the year. So if it would have changed at the beginning of the year, you would have to give notice to the buyer that the assessment has increased if you're a listing agent. Okay, so the important part here is in paragraph 3, make sure you put the correct amount. Next page, no changes here, but I do want to point out under paragraph C, this is a big deal under paragraph C, special assessments, right? Especially here in South Florida. Oh my goodness, there's special assessments going on everywhere. So under C, Roman numeral 2, you have to check off buyer or seller, right? So if you obviously represent a buyer, you want it checked off to be seller. Now be careful as a listing agent, if you put buyer here, you check buyer, you must put under Roman numeral I, right above it, what that assessment is. You can't just check buyer and not tell the buyer what that assessment is. You have to disclose to the buyer what that assessment is so they are aware of what they have to pay. So if you just check buyer here and do not put anything under Roman numeral 1, the seller has to pay for it. Okay, if you put seller here, you don't technically have to put it up there because it's going to get paid at closing. But if you want the buyer to pay for it, you have to tell the buyer what it is. Special assessment regarding elevators or roof at $200 a month for the remaining 24 months. And you have to be pretty detailed. You just can't put special assessment upcoming or anything like that. So please note, if you want the buyer to pay for it, you have to disclose what it is under paragraph C, Roman numeral I, basically where all those blank lines are above. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
They have to be voted or upcoming.
So there's definitions of what pending and levied means. So we're going to look, it's a good question, Frank. So let's go to Roman numeral 3, which is below it. if special assessments levied or pending exist as of the effective date and have not been disclosed above by seller, then seller shall pay such assessments in full at closing. So what does pending or levied mean? If we go up to now Roman numeral 1, pending means that it's been on the association agenda or reported in the minutes of the association within 12 months prior to the effective date. So that's what pending means. Levied means that it's been approved by the board. So it starts to get a little more detailed on what exactly a special assessment is and when it's been passed. So that's why it's good at the very beginning to be very open with both sides and say, when you ask the listing agent, do you know of any upcoming special assessments? And they say yes, have them tell you what it is, talk to your buyer and say, hey, how do you want to work this out and everything. So it's very important in this situation to be very open about what special assessments are coming and what current special assessments there are. Okay?
Best of the association.
If you can, yes, if you want to do that extra work, but yes, that's 100% correct. Don't rely on other people because special assessments, as we know, can be 60,000, 100,000. You don't want your buyer running into that. Because they're going to look to you and say, hey, why am I paying 100,000? They're going to be super upset. So be very cautious now about special assessments in this day and age because pretty much every building here on the ocean is having a special assessment done. So make sure we are aware of what those are and disclose them to the buyer and then negotiate who's going to pay for what. Okay. Condo docs, just a tip, make sure to check paragraph 5D at the bottom of the page. Make sure that is checked off. This allows the buyer to cancel after 3 days of receipt of the condo docs. And what's important about the condo docs? The main thing about the condo docs now, well, now there's two. It just used to be the rules and regulations, you know, if you have a dog, the size of the dog, cars and things like that. But now what's important is the financials, which will tell the buyer if the association has any reserves. And if there are no reserves, that means anything that comes up now and in the future, they have to pass a special assessment. So reserves now are very important to look for in financials to make sure the association has money in case repairs are needed. So those are the two important condo docs. They also have to send you the declaration, but that's just a bunch of legal stuff. There's nothing important there. So make sure to check 5D. Now, also, if you're a listing agent, make sure you provide all these documents to the buyer's agent, because if you don't, this cancellation clause goes all the way up to closing. So if you provide the condo docs 1 day before closing, the buyer still has the right to cancel within 3 days. So as a listing agent, make sure to get all these documents from the association. Most likely now they're in electronic form. Bless you. Make sure to send those to the buyer's agent. Okay? Next page on the condo writer is the first change we're going to see. This is page 3 of 4 at the top. What they changed now was paragraph 6. It used to say that the buyer was entitled to receipt of the condo docs. Now it says seller shall, and it also says at seller's expense, provide buyer with current copies of the condo docs specified in 5 above. So no longer was it a maybe, now it's a shall. Shall means the seller must. So make sure to provide the condo docs to the buyer's agent. And also, second paragraph, they've added this as well as the governance form described in section 718. Now, what the heck is the governance form? Luckily for you, you have a good attorney here that has attached it to the form. So the governance form is attached to this packet. You can go, I think, 2 more pages back. It's provided by the Department of Business and Professional Regulation. It is a 5-page document
Mm.
that now must also be given to the buyer's agent along with the rest of the condo docs.
This? Oh,
It looks like
5 page.
this. Yeah, that one.
okay.
You'll see at the top, condominium governance form.
It has to be included in the condo writings?
No, in the condo documents that you send to the buyer's agent.
This paper, we need to put it,
It's actually, it's a 5-page document, so the
Okay.
rest of the
we need to
packet,
include it in the condo docs.
yes.
Okay.
You can get this obviously online, that's where I got it, or you can email me and I can send it to you. But this form now must be part of the condo docs. The association might have a copy or they might not. So to avoid you being in default of the contract, make sure that either you look at the condo docs that the association has given you and notice that it's there, or if it's not, you must attach it. Now, this is important to know as a buyer's agent. If you don't get these documents, you can cancel. So this paragraph says that the seller must, and if the seller does not, seller's in default. And if the seller's in default, the buyer can cancel and get their deposit back. So for a listing agent, make sure to provide it, and a buyer's agent, make sure to request it. Valerie, you getting hot flashes? There's a lot of information here, huh? Throwing at you. Cindy, maybe you can lower the air, or there's also a fan right there that, next to, yes, it'd be hot, it'd be cold. Okay, so that's paragraph 6. That was the change. And make sure you check the box that says buyer requests. You want to make sure that you're requesting it. Paragraph 6, the one we were talking to condo writer. Just make sure it says buyer requests. Paragraph 8, just as a tip, parking space number, that's the actual parking space number, like spot G32 or whatever. It's not just one parking space, so make sure you put the actual parking space number, okay? And if there is a storage unit, you would put that under other or anything like that, storage unit number 3. So make sure we're specific with the parking space number because there are, as we know, if some of you live in condos, there's good parking spaces and there's not so good parking spaces. There's partially covered parking spaces and not covered parking spaces. So you want to make sure they tell you the parking space number, so you get that at time of closing. As a title company, we would do an assignment of parking space, and they're entitled to that parking space. Also, just another tip, remember, parking spaces most likely, 90% of the time, are reservation of right. You don't actually deed the parking space. You're entitled to use it, but the association is the owner of the parking space, so.
Oh, it's not deeded.
Most likely not. There are some occasions where they are, but most associations have stopped doing that because they are realizing that they can rent certain spaces and whatnot. So it's an assignment of right to use the parking space. But we'll check at time of closing when we do our searches whether the spot is deeded or not. But the point here is just make sure you get the actual parking space number. Okay, now the big change for the condo writer, paragraph 10. All of paragraph 10 is new. Well, not necessarily new. They basically now made it a fillable form that talks about all these integrity studies and inspections and everything because of the tragedy that happened. So these are the 3 reports now that the listing agent has to ask. When you get a listing, you got to contact the association and say to them, please send me, and you can just copy this, the milestone inspection, the turnover inspection report, and the structural integrity reserve study. and then wait for their replies. If they say, well, we haven't done it yet, then you would check off Roman numeral 3. If they say, yeah, we've done it and here it is, then you're going to check off Roman numeral 1. Roman numeral 2 says it's not required, and that really only applies to buildings 2 stories or less. These studies do not apply to
Which
2
one?
stories or less, where it says not required. But you as a buyer's agent, what your role is going to be is to leave this blank because you don't know any of these things, unless you do know with the association. But you're going to leave it blank, and you're going to tell a listing agent, check off the appropriate boxes, initial it at the top of the page, and send it back to me. Okay? So most likely, it's going to be either Roman numeral 1, that it's required, and they've done it, or it's going to be Roman numeral 3, it's required, and they haven't done it. But it's been now almost a year or so. Most likely, all these inspections have been done and they've been sent to the association. So most likely, it's going to be 10A1. If you have a realtor that says, I don't know what they are, I'm not filling it out, then fill in Roman numeral 1, where it's required and they have to provide it. Okay? That protects the buyer, because then if it's been done, they have to send it to you. And if they don't send it to you, then they're in default, and then you can cancel, because on the next page, we're going to check off Roman numeral 2 under subparagraph D, where it says, similar to what we just talked about, the condo docs, that this contract is voidable within 3 days after receipt of these reserve studies. Okay? So make sure to check off paragraph D, Roman numeral 2. That you can check off before submitting to the listing agent. And this protects the buyer because it says that the buyer is entitled to these 3 studies and reports, and if the buyer doesn't get it, then they can cancel within 3 days. Okay? So that's the important part of this.
This is here on.
D, Roman numeral 2.
Mhm.
Yes. You can check that off when filling out this form. You can leave paragraph 10A, 10B, and 10C blank and tell the listing agent to fill that out. And if the listing agent says, well, I'm not filling it out because I don't know any of those answers, then you can check off number 1 for all of those sections A, B, and C, Roman numeral 1.
Any one.
A1, B1, C1. There are 3 different reports now that need to be done. And these are all very important, and you want the buyer to know whether there have been structural issues and whether they're fixing them and whatnot. So they're very important because some of the buildings are a little bit older, so you want to make sure the integrity and structure of the buildings are secure. So 10A1, 10B1, 10C1, if the listing agent is unaware. And at the beginning, there's going to be, I got a call this morning again about the listing agent says she didn't know anything about this, and the association has no idea either. It's probably not true, but okay, fine. If they say that, then check off Roman numeral 1 for paragraph 10 to protect your buyer. Okay? And that's it, friends. We can answer some questions here in a second, but let Cindy finish with people here on live. Thanks for attending. If you have questions, contact myself or Cindy, and I'll turn it back over to Cindy.
I just want to thank everyone for attending in person and live, and thank John, Ioannou, Florida Closing and Escrow. And by the way, John was voted top 50 real estate attorneys in America. And also distinguished attorneys. So we're here to help you with your success. and we have great marketing tools, and we will include contract draft, review, addendum, answering any questions, and more. So we hope to hear from you, and we hope to assist you soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.